Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Your Royal Highness, esteemed guests, thank you very much for the invitation today for me to talk to you about the journey behind the 99. When I first had the idea, of course, as Kuwait's a very small country, so the minute something comes out of your mouth, everybody finds out about it. So I got a call from one of my cousins, Abdullah, who called me up. Abdullah's very conservative, has the long beard, the short dishdasha, the whole bit. And said, Naif, this idea you have for superheroes, that's fantastic, it's great. But Islam, it's haram to draw things and pictures, and why don't you have the characters become bananas and pencils and stuff like that? And I said, Abdullah, you're not my target segment. Don't buy the books. But this idea that Islam forbids art actually predates Islam. It was actually the second commandment that came to Moses that forbade art because for fear that art would be idolized, that people would start bowing down to the art versus God. And this idea no longer exists in the Western world, but still kind of permeates our thought here. And the question is why? And the answer lies in the use of language. For 1,000 years, religion in Europe was in Latin. And as we know, languages evolve. And so what started happening is the equivalent of what's called vulgar Latin, or the language I'm speaking to today, English, French, Italian, Spanish. All these were considered they were poo-pooed upon. And as years passed, the Pope, the Catholic Church, had more and more control over arts and culture because those languages just were not used. And what it took for that to change is it took King Henry, who really, really, really wanted that divorce, to translate the Bible into English. And it took Martin Luther to translate the Bible into German, and all of a sudden, Europe woke up. Europe woke up because finally the language that they were writing in was equal to the language they were thinking in, was equal to the language they were speaking in. And coincidentally, that's when the Arab world went to sleep. Every prophet comes with a miracle. The prophet Moses came with the ability to turn a stick into a snake because language at the day, magic was the discourse of the day. That was power. But the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to a Mecca that was rife with poetry and prose. And so his gift, his miracle, was the language in which the Quran came in. But if your miracle is language, and language evolves, what do you do? What we did is we came up with all kinds of rules to freeze it. And that's why we went to sleep. When the Bible got translated, all of a sudden, what happened in Europe through the Reformation and the Renaissance is you had art that was inspired by Christianity, but not religious. The stories were still built on biblical stories, but they were exciting and new. And that's how extremism's tide was curbed in Europe. Let me take you to the modern day. Any of you guys seen the movie Waterworld by any chance? Show of hands. Who's seen Waterworld? So Waterworld was Genesis from the Bible. In the Bible, man starts in heaven because of greed or the apple. He ends up on earth. He spends the rest of his time trying to get back to heaven. Some believe it exists, some don't. Those that believe it exists, if you're Christian, believe the way back is proven that heaven exists. The book is the Bible, and the way back is through the child Jesus. Let's go back to Waterworld. In Waterworld, man starts on dry land. Because of greed or the apple, the polar ice caps melt due to pollution, and now he's in Waterworld. And he spends his days trying to get back to dry land. Those that believe it exists have a book proving that dry land exists, the equivalent of the Bible. It was a copy of National Geographic. And the way back in the movie, if you remember, was a tattoo on the back of a child. It was a girl, but it was a representation of Jesus Christ. So Hollywood does this again and again, and the reason they do this is because there's a Western conspiracy. I'm kidding, okay? The reason they do this is the Bible is known as the greatest story ever told, and 1 billion people know the stories. And so Hollywood creates new storylines and builds it on older architecture. So it's exciting because it's new, but it's also familiar. I showed my son Hamed a picture of the Mona Lisa online. I said, what do you think? He was 10 years old at the time. He said, it's dark, he likes to smile, he saw it in a Japanese cartoon once. 10-year-old's answer. And then I showed him a piece of art on the wall in my house. And I said, Baba, what do you think of this? And he sat there and he looked and he said nothing. I said, what's the matter? You told me what you thought of one piece of art, why not this? And he looked at me and he said, Baba, it's the Quran. Of course it's beautiful. But that's the problem. That's the problem. Because when your religion is your art, then you don't get a voice in giving an interpretation of what it means. We're in a region that needs jobs. 92% of Kuwaitis are employed by the government. I believe 90% of Saudis are too. The people who are supposed to be creating the jobs are the entrepreneurs, not the governments. But to enable that, you need creativity. To have creativity, you need to be able to think creatively. Our kids are taught in schools in a language that's the equivalent of Latin. My son came home with 5 words put into sentences when he was in the 4th grade. I didn't know a single one, so I called my mother, who taught philosophy in the Arabic language her entire career. She knew 2 of the 5 words. What is that? We no longer think in the language we speak, in the language that we write in. And that's why we're asleep. When I graduated college, I came to Kuwait, and months after that, a man had just fired a guy from his job because of his religion. And to make matters worse, the guy gave out leaflets to the local community apologizing that had he known this guy's religion, he wouldn't have hired him to begin with. And I thought, my God, where did I just land? And so I wrote my first, what became a children's book. It was not intended for children, but then I wrote it for adults, and then UNESCO gave me a Children's Literature Award, and I didn't know how to take that exactly, but the story was very simple. It was about a land called Bouncy Land where everybody was round. In that society, they judge you based on 2 values, how high you bounce and how fast you roll. That's it. The main character is born as a half circle, can't do either, he's ostracized, they make fun of him, he tries to change, it doesn't work. At the end, though, his difference ends up saving everybody and forces society to reevaluate the importance of diversity. Basically, there's a flood, the round ones can't control themselves, but he's now boat-shaped, and he's able to save them. Book did fine, second book came out, he goes to a land called Rainbow Land. In Rainbow Land, they judge you not according to how high you bounce or how fast you roll, they're more sophisticated in their prejudice. They judge you according to the color of your bow tie and where it is on the rainbow. So red is better than orange, better than yellow, all the way down to purple, the worst place in society. And they have marriage laws, as any good society might. If you have a red bow tie, you can't marry anybody with a blue ribbon, because what does red and blue give you? It gives you purple, the last place in society. And so he asked them why they live their life in that way. And typically people who do put words in God's mouth, but now that I'm a children's book writer, I can't talk about God. So they point up to the rainbow in the sky and say it's the natural order of things, to which he points to the reflection of the rainbow in the river and shows them what's on top is now on the bottom. And that's not a way to judge somebody else. That book did fine. Book 3 got me in trouble, and I quit writing at the age of 27. Book 3 I wrote for my son Hamid when he was born. It's about a land called Thailand where they wore ties, neckties, not bow ties. And in Thailand, there were 2 things you had to know. Number 1 is that they're 10 times the size as Bouncy Landers. They're huge. But they also had these laws that they can't buy new ties. They have to wear the ties of their father, who wears the ties of his father before him. So it's a tie, but it's also a tie to the past. So he goes on his spring break. Nobody knows why, but all the Thailanders are now the same size as the Bouncy Landers. But because of their laws, their ties are disproportionate to their body size. So when they bounce, when they roll, their ties get under them, make them slow and inefficient. And when they bounce, their ties cover their eyes. They don't know where they're going to land. And those that take off their ties in protest get shunned. And so he asked them why they live their life in that way. And so they show him the law. And the law says you must wear of the ties of your fathers, not the ties of your fathers. So they get every tailor in town and every tie in town, and from the same material, they cut out new ties to better serve their modern day needs. So I get asked at the Ministry of Information, this is about the Quran, isn't it? And I said, huh? I said, my books are designed to reflect the reader's thinking. Do you think somebody reading this in Tokyo or Washington or New York is going to think Quran? Clearly, my book is doing its job because it's reflecting your thoughts. They didn't buy it. I quit writing at the age of 27. I could never do Starving Artist, as you can tell, but I could do Angry Young Man really well. I left, quit writing at 27, went to train. I became a clinical psychologist. I worked at Bellevue Hospital in New York in the Survivors of Political Torture program. My patients came out of Iraqi prisons, Syrian prisons, many other countries in the region, people who were getting political asylum in the US. Now, there are people there from all over the world, just that I didn't speak the other languages. And the one story I heard again and again was people who grew up to idolize their leaders as heroes, only to be tortured by those heroes. I took a break after doing that for a couple of years, applied to business school, and just before I went to business school, all hell breaks loose. 9/11 happens. And I started to think very, very seriously about what to do. Because every time something like this happens, our leaders go up and say, that's not Islam. Well, I'm here telling you, that's not enough. That's not enough. Because the only way to beat extremism is through arts and culture. It's the only way. And so I thought, you know what, Naif? You've been complaining about this for a while. Why don't you do something about it? And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew this. I'm the father of 5 young boys. And my boys, I worry about what representation of Islam is going to be out there for them. And one of the stories I tell, one of the hats I wear, is I lecture at the medical school in Kuwait. And every year in February, I give out 2 articles, one from the New York Times and one from New York Magazine. I take away the name of the reporter, I take away the name of the city, everything's gone except the facts. And the students read them out loud. The first one is about a group called the Party of God who wants to ban Valentine's Day because Valentine is the Christian saint. Red roses are illegal that day, and any boys and girls caught flirting get married off immediately. The second article is about a woman complaining because 6 bearded men in minivans chased her on the street for talking to a man who wasn't related to her. And I asked the students where they think these things take place. The first one, they say Saudi Arabia. Surprise, surprise. The second one, they're split between Saudi and Afghanistan. What blows their mind is the first one takes place in India. It's the party of a Hindu god. It has nothing to do with Islam. The second one was in upstate New York. It's an Orthodox Jewish community. Okay? Now, the part that's dangerous is those communities responded to this in a way that I would call positive. The Hindu community rejected this. They said, this is Talibanization. This is Islam's influence on us. Good Hindus don't act this way. The woman in upstate New York called these 6 bearded Orthodox Jewish men stupid Talibans. Same message. But what did my students say? They said, it's us. And when a group starts to self-identify as extreme, we have a serious problem. Now, there's a part of the brain called the mirror neuron. The mirror neuron lights up whether you learn something by actually doing it or you learn it vicariously by watching it. Some stories. Roger Bannister, first man ever to run a mile in under 4 minutes in 1954. Before that, it hadn't been done. Well, guess what? When the media reported it, within 3 years, 17 people were able to do the same. Okay? People just had to be able to know that it's possible. Same thing happened a year ago. Tunisia falls, Facebook, Twitter, next thing you know, Egypt falls, Libya falls, one after the other. That's in the real world, but can the same thing happen in fiction? Can you actually capture somebody's imagination and show them a better tomorrow through fiction, through art, through culture? In 1970, Sesame Street introduced an African-American couple. The reaction from Mississippi, they banned the show. It took the New York Times to name and shame them for them to reverse their decision. Cut to the 1980s, The Cosby Show, still the 3rd longest running show in history, did something very, very amazing. Initially, Bill Cosby was going to be a limousine driver, his wife was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and they were going to have 4 kids. But by the time the show came out, he was a doctor, she was a lawyer, and they were going to have a 5th kid to show the example of good parenting. Now, what the show did, in a very neutral way, because they never talked about race, this family just happened to be black. That's it. Okay? Now, the amazing thing is it changed the way white Americans saw African Americans, but it also changed, I would argue, the way African Americans saw themselves. Cut to 24, just a few years ago. 24 had 2 bad white presidents, one of whom looked like and acted like Richard Nixon during Watergate. It had 2 good black presidents who were strong and very ethical and just great representations of what I would want my leader to be like. And guess what happens the year after that? President Obama comes to power. Now, did 24 put Obama in power? No. But did it help? I have to believe that it did. So I'm giving you all this background, and I'm going to ask you a question before I go on. Now, America has been able to get us to identify with anybody as a hero, even a serial killer. People who watch Dexter don't want Dexter to get caught, even though he's killing people. But they haven't been able to do that for an Arab or a Muslim yet. My story starts with a cigarette with the 99. I don't smoke. I've never smoked in my life, but it starts with a cigarette. It starts with a cigarette because when I had my first child, my wife had me buy these herbs that women in Kuwait take when they give birth. So I went to buy these herbs, and the guy who had a plastic bag, and as he's putting the herbs into the bag, he had a cigarette going to 2 fingers and a spoon going through the same 2 fingers, and he didn't know how much of it was the herb and how much of it was the actual cigarettes. And so I went home and I said, you're not taking this. Of course, I lost that argument. But I thought, you know what if this is branded nutraceutical? What if I could create an Islamic brand and kind of go back to the Prophet's medicine and the Quran and do this? And that was my thinking during business school when I was at Columbia. But then the US invaded Iraq, and the idea of raising money for a plant in Kuwait just didn't make sense anymore. And I found myself at the age of 32. I had 3 master's degrees and a doctorate. I'm in a cab going from Edgware Road to Harrods, which is a pilgrimage every Kuwaiti makes once in their lifetime. And in that cab ride, my sister turned to me and said, Nai, if you told me that after school you'd go back to writing and I'd illustrate, she's actually very talented. I said, yeah, I remember. She said, what do you think? And I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? I have my doctorate. I went to Columbia Business School. I want to go out there and get a real job. And going back to writing for, I never intended to write for kids. That's not for me. So I wanted to say shut up, but I couldn't say shut up because my mom was there. So I said, Samar, for me to go back now, it's got to be something that has the potential of Pokemon. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. That wasn't me saying I could do Pokemon. That was me saying, shut up. So she shut up. And as any New York State trained psychologist would do, I started to free associate. I said Pokemon. My next thought was there had been a fatwa against Pokemon. So it's not allowed into some places. My next thought was, my God, what's happened to Islam, and who is making these random decisions for my children? My next thought was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, and how disappointing He must be. My next thought was that Allah had 99 attributes. And ironically, by the time I got to Harrods, it brought me full circle back to Pokemon, which has over 1,000 attributes. And that's when I had the initial idea. I developed my pitch. I went to my investors and I said, listen, back then in 2003, the only superheroes that really existed were based on were in North America, based on Judeo-Christian archetypes. So like the prophets, all the superheroes are missing parents. Superman's parents die in Krypton. Batman's parents die when he's 6. Spider-Man's raised by his aunt and uncle. Lion King's father dies. Tarzan, we can be here till tomorrow morning. Okay, it's all the same story. And all of them, like the prophets, have a message delivered from above through a messenger. The prophets get it from God through Gabriel, but Peter Parker's taking that photograph in the library in Manhattan when the spider comes in from above and gives him his message through a bite. It's a metaphor for Gabriel coming down. Bruce Wayne is sitting in his bedroom when the bat flies over his head and he sees it as an omen to become Batman. Superman is not only sent from another planet to Earth in a spaceship, like Moses was on the Nile to new parents, but you hear the voice of his father saying to Earth, I have sent to you my only son. It's the voice of God in the Bible. Okay? So I told them, I said, listen, the only people using the Quran to post stories and manipulate kids today are the bad guys. Let me get in there, let me lift some stories, let me create secular news stories to compete for the hearts and minds of kids who are being taught to use their religion to hate. And I tell them now the only person crazier than me is them, because I had the idea, but they actually financed me. And I tell people of all my accomplishments, the one I'm most proud of is I'm the only Gulf citizen that went to Beirut and actually came out with money. My first round was 2 million Kuwaiti dinars, $7 million from 54 investors in 8 countries. $1 million came from my classmates in business school, and the rest came primarily from Kuwait. And I started. So here's some of my characters. We have Jabbar, who's one of our most popular characters from Saudi, on the far right. Noura from the Emirates, Jami' from Hungary, so on and so forth. Now, in the 99, it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what religion you have. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl. It doesn't matter if you cover your hair or not, although some do cover their hair. All that matters is a lesson from the Cosby Show, because it's very neutral. All that matters is you have a power. Can that power help us solve the problem that society has today? That's the only thing of value here. Nothing else is of value. It's about the future, not about the past. It's about the things we have control over, not the things that we don't have control over. So I'm going to put you inside my head right now, but I'm going to warn you, it's a little bit like Hotel California. You're going to be able to check out anytime you like, but you won't be able to leave. So in 2003, Baghdad falls. Well, we all know growing up in the region of the fall of Baghdad in 1258. The Mongols invade Baghdad, they destroy the library, all the books from Dar al-Hikmah get thrown in the Tigris River, and the Tigris changes color with ink. Story we've all heard. I chose that and I rewrote that story. In my version, librarians knew this was going to happen, and they get together an alchemical solution called King's Water that when mixed with 99 stones, would be able to save all that culture and history in the books. But the Mongols get there first. The books and the solution get thrown in the river. The librarians escape and dip the stones into the river and suck up all that information that we think is lost civilization. Those stones are then smuggled through Arabia into Andalusia and Spain, where they're safe for 200 years. But in 1492, 2 important things happen. The first is the fall of Grenada. The second is Columbus gets lost and finds America. So in my version, 33 of the stones are smuggled on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, Columbus's ships, and are spread in the New World. 33 go on the Silk Road on China, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, and 33 are spread between Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Now it's 2012, and we have 99 heroes from 99 different countries. They work in teams of 3. So important thing here is that in the 99, these stones that have the power all have a self-updating mechanism. The main bad guy, Rughal, does not want the stones to update. He wants to control the characters. And here's one of the archetypes. So Rughal is named for Abu Rughal. Abu Rughal led Abraha's army to destroy the Kaaba during the year of the elephant, the year the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born. But according to the Quran, God sent birds with stones that stop the elephants in their path. So who stops Rugal in the storylines? It's not birds, it's superheroes, and some of them do fly. And what do they use? They use their stones. So that's one example of how I use archetypes of stories that people are aware of to build new storylines on top of, very much how Hollywood has done it. That's Jabbar, our Saudi character, but that same stone 200 years ago, it was with a South African character, and 500 years ago, it was with a Mexican character. But the idea here is that back then, there was no internet, there was no Facebook, there were no phones. They couldn't connect with each other. So the bad guy was able to take their stones away one by one, but no longer. We got amazing reviews from the world's press, got covered all over the world, just for 5 years, consistently positive, very, very proud of that. It's the initiatives of the Ministries of Information in our region who tried to make a dent with millions of dollars with Islam. I'm very proud that we did it without a budget, without a PR firm, just with a good story. We're able to launch the comic book series in multiple languages. We just sold the rights in Malaysia and France recently. They're out in 12 languages, in Indonesia, and in China on mobile phones, and in the region here. The theme park opened in Kuwait 3 years ago. We have around 400,000 visitors a year. And we've done 2 back-to-school product deals. And I can tell you off the record that in 10 days, we're going to be announcing a regional bank that's launching banking products with the 99. So I don't care. I'm going to be carrying a kid's credit card in my wallet. I'm really, really excited. But one of the most important things we've done is we created a TV series. And before I talk to you about that, I would like you please to show the video now. It's a clip from the upcoming TV series.
Come out with your hands up. We are coming in on the ground now.
This is truly a gift I've given you.
It's a curse.
Stones?
Your stone is one of 99. Each bestows a powerful gift upon its bearer.
We call Nawaf Jabbar the Powerful, and my Noor stone makes me Nora, the Light.
So, who am I?
You are Dar, the Afflicted.
That means I hurt people.
We try to use our different powers to do good in the world.
To help people.
Your Noor stone has given you a great deal, but if you continue to misuse it, you'll only attract people who'll exploit you.
It's pretty clear. I'm part of something bigger. A new family, maybe. The 99.
I am Rugal. Nothing can stop me. This world belongs to the strong. The ones who are willing to crush dissent and impose their will on the mindless masses.
On guard!
The boy needs his father. Give me your Noor stones, all of you.
What are you doing?
Not giving up. We'll form a triad link.
What?
Teamwork. 99 style.
Thank you. So the TV series is 26 half-hour episodes, co-produced by Endemol in the UK, written in Hollywood by the writers behind Ben 10 and Star Wars and Batman. And when it comes out on TV, it's going to be one of the highest quality animated TV shows the world has seen. You know, the days of having the first one in Kuwait and the tallest building in Bahrain are over. There is nothing to stop us from creating world-class things coming out of the region. It's the first time IP from the region has been sold globally. So we sold it to Cartoon Network in some territories. We sold it to public TV in other territories. The first market that actually bought it was the US a joint venture between Discovery and Hasbro called The Hub, which I'll talk about that in a sec, but it's coming out this year. Now, one of the fun things we got to do is, President Obama reached out to the Muslim world. So I convinced DC Comics to do a new series where Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman worked with my characters. There's a new series that launched out of New York that have our characters working cape to shoulder, and you see there Batman, Superman, and a Wonder Woman who's wearing clothes for the first time in 65 years. It took a Gulf Arab to be involved in that one, right? So, very excited about this now. But one of the fun things that happened is when President Obama found out about this, he actually spoke about it in a speech he gave. He spent a couple minutes talking about this association, and he called this the most innovative response to his Cairo speech, which is amazing. And everybody thought, wow, we're now on top of the world. What could possibly go wrong when the President of the United States of America talks about your concept? We get a fatwa from Fox. Obama's Muslim and this proves it. He's trying to brainwash your kids with Sharia superheroes. Stop the show before it starts. My favorite was we can't let the Muslims brainwash our children like the Mexicans did with Dora the Explorer. You can't make this stuff up. But what happened is our broadcaster got spooked. And even though they bought the show a year ago, have been delaying the showing for fear of the right wing in the US. And so we have a saying in Arabic that when you're bitten by a snake, you become afraid of rope. There's a similar saying in English, once bitten, twice shy. And there's no denying that terrible things have happened in the name of my religion. They've happened in the names of all religions. And it's very easy, when you're lazy, to just take new information and fit it into existing schema. That's what we all do. It's how we're programmed. And it's much more difficult to create a new box for things. And I'm reminded of a story. These are my two babies. Their grandparents live in Jeddah. They're half Saudi, and sometimes I don't understand what they're saying to me. But يبغى الموية على الترابيزة. I don't know what else he wants to. But on the way to Saudi, so Rakan, the baby who was 2 at the time, were waiting by the bags, and Rakan sees a woman wearing a bushia. I don't know what you call it in Saudi, but she was fully covered from top to bottom. And Rakan is looking at her, and he's never seen this before, and he's kind of looking, and he's trying to fit her into an existing schema, and nothing works for him. And then he knows what this is. Rakan understands. He lets go of his mom's hand, walks up to the lady, arms out, fingers down, eyeballs opposite. Ooh, scary. Must be Scooby-Doo. What else could it be, right? But we all, we all think in that way. Even I do. You do as well. We see something new, we try to fit it into something existing. So to some people, anything to do with Islam is bad. And there are people out there exploiting that. There's a great report called Fear Incorporated, Fear Inc. If you get the chance, pick it up. It's online. It's free to anybody. Shows how $40 million have been funneled to 5 misinformation experts by 6 foundations in America to basically go out there to fight the Shariaization of America. And this has it has really bad consequences. And it's the same people who came after us who also influenced Anders Breivik, who went on the massacre in Norway. But also, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened in America last month with the show All American Muslim. All American Muslim was a show with 6 families who happened to be Muslim. He was a policeman, she was a school teacher, they just happened to be Muslim, nothing else. What happened is the show comes out, the same group that attacked us and attacked, pretty much anything to do with Islam, attacked the advertisers of the show. And next thing you know, Lowe's Home Improvement pulls their advertising from the show. And so our broadcaster now feels smart. They saved themselves from this stuff. And the political situation in America is something that I hope they can work through it. But this is how I started. This is the back of a Howard Johnson's table mat when I wrote the business plan. Basically, this are the things I was going to look at. This is back in 2003. If you see up there, it says New Muslim Archie. I met the owners of Archie. Both of them passed away since. But both, they were Jewish New Yorkers in their 70s at the time. And I said to one of them, I said, I have a vision for an Islamic Archie. So one of them gets very nervous. He says, Islamic Archie, how would that work? I said, well, Archie's been trying to choose between Betty and Veronica for 60 years. I say marry both and let's move on to new storylines already. And I keep a straight face and finally, and his jaw drops and finally I smiled. But this is where we were. And this is now, after $40 million in financing and hundreds of jobs over the last few years, is where we're at. But it hasn't been all roses. There's been ups and downs and sideways. We've had a million things go wrong, and we're still learning as we go along. We just closed our 3rd round of financing from Abraj Capital in Dubai, which I'm very proud of. But the story there basically is You know, Abraj turned me down in 2004. They turned me down in 2007. I went up to the CEO who I got to know because he turned me down so many times. And at a World Economic Forum meeting, and I said, Arif, I heard you came here on a private airplane. Is it true? He said, yes, why? I said, this may be inappropriate, but can I fly home with you? He said, you don't live in Dubai? I said, I'll figure it out. I live in Kuwait. He said, okay, come. So I had him and his team on an airplane. They had nowhere to go without a parachute. And we sealed the deal. So very, very proud of that. Now basically, you know, this whole story I told you about was captured on a film that came out on public TV in America called Wham! Bam! Islam, which is it's the story basically of my life, but focusing on the last 5 years of building this brand. It's been seen by 2 million Americans so far. And this film, you know, shows how even though initially we had some issues in Saudi, the TV show is actually going to show in Saudi before it shows in America, even though America bought it first, and puts extremism in context. Now, this project is something that they call a double bottom line project. It has a financial goal and it has a social goal. So the financial goal, one of the things for me to inspire me is in my office, I have a framed copy of the magazine with Pokemon on it, thinking, inshallah, one day the 99 get to the point where they're on the cover of a major news magazine. I'm very proud that that happened in April in 2011 when we made the cover of Newsweek. Thank you. But more important, but equally as important, this idea of saying this is in Islam when something terrible happens, that's not enough. The guns and bombs don't help too. The only thing that works is to compete for that space. So when you see the cover of the 99 Newsweek, juxtaposed to the one I showed you initially, you see how far we've come in terms of crowding out the effects of extremism. And I'm gonna leave the young winners. I want to congratulate you for your awards, and I just want to leave you with something I shared with my children. When I saw the first episode ever of the animation, it was in India, and I took my children with me to watch it. And at the end, I said one thing to them. I said, Baba, this is proof that anything can happen. I had no experience in animation. I had no experience in comic books. All I had was a passion that I knew that something needed to be different to reposition Islam in the Muslim world, but it had to be done in a secular way as far as I was concerned. In the series, there's never mention of Allah or the Prophet or anybody's religion. It's just good storytelling, good art that's inspired by Islam versus being Islam. And I wish you luck on your journeys, and the more of this that you guys come up with, the more that you'll save us from ourselves. Thank you very much.